If you like massive cheap creatures that can overwhelm opponents, then this is definitely the deck for you. If you'd like to find out more about the Premodern format, please do check out my channel. I have loads of videos all about it. There will be deck lists at the end of this video, but let's talk about the strategy and what the deck does first. And so this deck has access to two 3-mana 5/5s, which are clearly massive for 3 mana. They do both come with quite big downsides though. One can't block and makes you sacrifice a permanent every time you deal combat damage, whereas the other one has trample, which is definitely an upside on a creature this big, but we have to sacrifice a permanent for every 1 damage dealt to it. To get around this, we're playing a lot of permanents that give us extra value, or cards that we want to sacrifice. For example, Sarcomancy, which gives us a 2/2 zombie and leaves behind an annoying enchantment that we actually want to sacrifice. And there's 2 builds of this deck, one that plays green and one that doesn't. The green one plays Rancor, which is a perfect card in this deck, as we can just sack it to Drinker of Sorrow every turn, and it gives the Drinker Trample, which it didn't have before. Call of the Herd is also an excellent 2-for-1 and can help to mitigate some of those sacrifice effects. The mono black builds, obviously not having access to Rancor or Call of the Herd, tend to play more copies of the huge creatures, and they also play things like Ravenous Rats and Phyrexian Rager to try and get some of that card advantage back. There's no consensus yet about fast mana. Some decks play it, some decks don't. But generally speaking, the mono black decks will tend to play more of it because their mana base is much more simple and they can fit more fast mana in. These decks tend to prioritize mana efficiency. Losing a few life points to a Vendetta or an alternate cast Snuff Out really isn't a big deal when you're attacking with creatures that can deal 5 or more in one go. Apart from those, they will also often play Cursed Scroll, not only as a way to grind out longer games, but because they can empty their hand very quickly and start activating the Cursed Scroll early. Almost every deck with black will play some form of hand disruption, and this deck is no exception. The only difference is that some lists might choose Mesmeric Fiend and Cabal Therapy over Duress, because the Fiend is another permanent that you can sacrifice if you have to. So in terms of other creatures, apart from the ones we've looked at, there are a lot of options. Some lists, usually the red-green ones, might play Skittering Scourge, as they can get around its sacrifice clause with things like Call of the Herd, as well as Sarcomancy, and a 3/2 flyer is very good, especially with Rancor. The lists with Dark Ritual do tend to play Nantuko Shade, as you can use those late-game rituals to make the Shade massive. And almost all of the lists, without exception, will play Carnophage as a great early attacking creature. These are also some other popular creatures. Bone Shredder is clearly great to sacrifice to Drinker of Sorrow after you've got the value from it. Doughty Slayer is basically unblockable and with a Rancor can end games very quickly. And Withered Wretch is just good in the current meta as it can take out annoying graveyard things. These 3 are definitely less popular, but do still see some play occasionally. Graveborn Muse can be good as an attacking body that can draw cards. Hypnotic Spectre is actually very good in the builds with Dark Ritual, and it's good in control combo metas. And Nantuko Vigilante is useful in those green-black builds where maybe you want some extra disenchant effects. I have seen builds with Flesh Reaver, Tempting Worm, and Bane of the Living, although it is rare, but I thought I'd just include it in the video because I have actually seen it once or twice before. It is actually possible to build a meta-style deck with lots of protection from white cards. There's Black Knight, Knight of Stromglad, and Strength of Lunacy, which are all very good against white decks. And if you have all of these cards in the same build, it's going to be very difficult for white decks to deal with. In terms of non-creature spells, there's loads of options there, whether it's options for alternate removal, Power Matrix to help get those big creatures in, Phyrexian Arena for drawing more cards. I've also seen builds that play things like Smokestack, Bottomless Pit, Tangle Wire. There's really quite a lot of different ways to build this deck, and that's one of the cool things about it. There's also quite a few options with land. We've already talked about the mana acceleration lands, but you can play things like Rishton Port or Wasteland as well if you want to. A lot of the green blacklists tend to run the Gemstone Mine Lair Land combo so that they can bounce the mine and reset its counters. Personally, I never really understood why they play Gemstone Mine because they're not really fussed about taking damage from something like City of Brass, but having a land that you have to sacrifice after 3 uses in a deck with other cards that make you sacrifice stuff, it always made me feel like it was setting me back in terms of tempo, and there were a bunch of times where I just wished that I didn't have to sack my land to play something, and then, you know, again, sack something else because of my creatures. So apart from those, the decks tend to just run the usual lands that you would expect, like Pain lands and basic swamps. There's also a lot of options for the sideboard. You'll always want Engineered Plague, as that's just a classic in all black sideboards, and you'll probably want something for dealing with graveyards. The mono black lists run Dystopia, as it's amazing against green and white decks. However, the green builds, they usually play other cards instead, such as Naturalize or Hidden Gibbons for those control matchups. Really, there are a lot of different options, and it's up to you and your playstyle what you like. I've added this new section because a lot of people in the comments were asking for more detailed information about sideboarding, so please do give me some feedback on this part. Let me know if it's useful, let me know if there's stuff that I need to add or change, as I do like to help you guys as much as I can with these videos. So yeah, thank you, and looking forward to your feedback. So against combo and control decks that either don't have creatures or have very, very few creatures that aren't really relevant to their game plan, I would definitely start by taking out my creature removal, as there's a high chance it's going to just be dead in that matchup. So in that case, it's likely things like Hidden Gibbons, more Disruption, Discard, or specific targeted hate cards like Tormod's Crypt or Naturalize will be good in those matchups. So I'd be looking to bring in some combination of those. Against combo decks, where their combo relies on them having a creature and you can actually stop the combo with the removal, obviously we can't take it out there. Instead, I'd be looking to take out things like Curse Scroll that are perhaps far too slow for the matchup, or cards like Skittering Scourge, where, you know, it's a good card, but it's going to be the end of our curve, and if we draw 3 of them, let's say, then we just can't commit them all to the board at the same time, and it's very unlikely our opponent will actually be able to remove them if they're playing a pure combo deck. So I really don't want to draw more than 1. So I'd look to shave some of the extra copies of those and just play a few, like 1 or maybe 2. Before we get into aggro, it's worth talking about the deck having some cards that are very, very bad against burn. So if I was playing against a very burn heavy deck, I would definitely be siding out Phyrexian Negators if I had them in the main, and I would definitely be taking out 1 or 2 copies of Rancor, because it's just not that good if you go to cast it and they kill your creature in response, meaning the Rancor will never actually resolve, it will go straight to the graveyard and you won't be able to return it, effectively getting 2 for 1. Otherwise, I like taking out Discard against aggressive decks, because usually they will unload their hand very quickly, and then the discard cards will just be useless if you draw them mid to late game. And usually the sideboard has some very obvious cards to bring in against aggro, such as creature removal. Your starting hands will depend on your build, but generally speaking, with aggro decks, you're looking for a combination of early creatures and disruption. This deck is fairly straightforward to play. Either accelerate something big out quickly and kill the opponent with it, or use your good creatures and disruption to really attack your opponent's hand while your creatures just finish the job. Usually they're big enough or good enough that they can overwhelm most opponents, but you can back them up with things like Rancor and creature removal. Cheap and efficient removal is one of the best ways to attack this deck, as is very small and efficient blockers. Plus, combos that can just combo you off the top of their deck are difficult to deal with, because the disruption only attacks the hand and there's nothing you can do about something they just draw that turn. The deck is definitely an aggro deck, and you'll be the beatdown in the majority of matchups. It can just steamroll opponents with your huge creatures that sometimes are just way too big for them to deal with, where you just smash through all of their defenses. It's all about putting lots of pressure on and them just not being able to deal with it. The pros of the decks are it can win very quickly, it has strong disruption, and it can be very overpowering. Can also be quite resilient, as each individual creature can be a huge threat on its own. The downsides are some of the top decks are quite difficult to deal with, as they can just top deck a replenish or top deck a combo piece. Sometimes with black decks you can just draw the wrong half of your deck. For example, if you just draw all the discard against goblins, or you just draw all of the creature enchantments against control. Enchantments and artifacts are difficult for the mono black builds to deal with, but the green builds do have some options to deal with those. So here's an example list of one of the mono black builds. Again, I will say there are a lot of different ways to build this deck, as there are just so many options. And here is a green black build. I think lately the green black builds are far more popular than the mono black builds. Please do like, comment and subscribe, and thank you for watching.